they have now. See, the reason Puerto Rico is broke, it's not because they're not a state. Puerto Rico was broke because Puerto Rico was dumb enough to vote in a socialist government that basically spent the country into bankruptcy. Even though they didn't have federal income taxes, this nation should be a paradise, a capitalist paradise. It should be the richest spot on the planet. The reason they're not is because they had too much government. And if they became a state, they would have even more government. Because not only would they have to deal with their own incompetent government in San Juan, they'd have to deal with an even bigger, more incompetent government in Washington, D.C. You know, one of the things that Americans did to Puerto Rico is that we made all the debt in Puerto Rico tax-free for every state, right? So no matter what state you live in, if you buy Puerto Rican debt, the interest is tax-free. And as a result, all these muni bond funds all around the country, they couldn't get enough Puerto Rican debt. Well, that was all Puerto Rican politicians needed to go to town, right? Because now they can promise all sorts of things to the voters. And of course, the biggest employer in Puerto Rico is the government of Puerto Rico. So the government and these guys are trying to get elected, so they promise more pay and more benefits to government workers, and the government workers say, yeah, that's who I'm voting for, the guy that's going to give me a raise. And where is the government getting the money to pay all the workers? They're getting it from Wall Street. They're selling these bonds because the government made everything triple tax-free, so it was a recipe for disaster. We were the cooks here in the United States. We created this recipe that they baked into this, $70 billion debt cake. It's our fault that they have so much debt. And of course, these muni bond funds, no one gives a damn. They don't do any research. They just assume, they'll never default. It's it's municipal debt. They're not going to default. They're required to pay. And so they keep loaning the money, even though they're broke. They go deeper and deeper into debt. There's no real market forces, protecting anything because they don't care. And then, of course, when the Fed kept interest rates so low for so long, that also fueled more demand. People needed yield, and Puerto Rico had it triple tax-free. So we helped enable the Puerto Rican government to go into debt. Now, becoming a state doesn't change that. The debt doesn't go away if they become a state. The way to get rid of the debt is to restructure it, default on it. That's what they have to do. That is a step in the right direction. The other thing that we did to Puerto Rico is that we subjected them to the Jones Act, which, we could exempt them from that. That would be a good thing. I guess if they became a state, the Jones Act would no longer be an issue. The reason it's an issue is because they are not a state. And what happens is we have forced Puerto Ricans, anything that gets shipped to Puerto Rico basically has to come on a U.S. flag ship from an American port directly to Puerto Rico. And it costs a fortune. It would obviously be a lot cheaper if these big shipments that were coming to the United States could just stop off at Puerto Rico, drop a few things off, and continue to Florida. But the Jones Act doesn't allow that to happen. So as a result, everything in Puerto Rico cost a lot more than it would cost if we simply didn't try to, give all this extra money to the maritime unions. And so because of the unions, we have been punishing Puerto Rican citizens. So that's one thing we can do. Of course, the other thing that we did to Puerto Rico is we forced them to abide by our minimum wage laws. Now, even though the average wage in Puerto Rico is half of the poorest state in the United States, they have the same minimum wage there. So it's basically Puerto Rico effectively has a $15, $16 minimum wage right now. And so all you people who think it's so great, the unemployment rate in Puerto Rico is like 12, 13%. I said, hardly anybody works. One of the main reasons is because of that minimum wage. And of course, if you add the federal income tax, you're gonna create an even greater incentive for people not to work. Now, of course, the upper income people, right, people who make more money, if they have to pay federal income taxes on top of state income tax. I mean, right now, Puerto Rico has an immigration problem, right? Some of the, the higher income people are leaving. Well, they're going to leave even faster if they have to escape the federal income tax. I mean, one of the reasons they don't leave is because they don't have to pay federal income taxes. Now, one of the smart things that Puerto Rico did was a few years ago, they passed this Act 2022 and basically said, even though we have a 30% income tax in Puerto Rico, if you move to Puerto Rico because we want you to help the economy, we will exempt you from that income tax and you'll pay a special tax that's basically 4%, and you'll have zero capital gains taxes. And so a lot of businessmen have moved to Puerto Rico in the last few years. This story doesn't get very much press. But of course, all that would stop if Puerto Rico became a state. Then why would anybody go there? Because they would actually have the highest income tax of any state, right? Because right now their state income tax is already higher than California, right? But if you don't have a federal income tax, you could live with it. But if you added the federal income tax on top of to be a state, they are in the perfect position where they have all the benefits of being an American without the IRS, without Obamacare. And all they have to do is give up the vote and maybe some of their welfare benefits. Now, I can see the attraction if all you care about is more welfare, and if you think that there's a bigger welfare check awaiting you if you're an American, if you're living in a state versus living in a territory. But why is that good for a nation? Do you want to just make it better to be on welfare? Is that the key to prosperity? More people collecting welfare? No. The key to prosperity is more people working, more people starting businesses, more people creating wealth, not sucking off of the government. And do you think Puerto Rico is going to create more wealth if we layer them with a federal income tax? If we unleash the IRS on a Puerto Rico, which right now is immune, right? That's the one place that the IRS doesn't infect. And now we want to set loose these IRS agents on this island. And somehow this is supposed to be a benefit to them. This is going to be what's going to cause them to all of a sudden be prosperous. I mean, come on. I mean, am I the only person out there that can see this, that the absolute worst thing for Puerto Rico is to become a state? And if any state in this union could trade places with Puerto Rico right now on its status and get out from under the income tax and the Obamacare, they would do it in a heartbeat.